The 6.5 is on the road here in San Diego. We're at Cisco Live 2025. Daniel, it's great to not be in Las Vegas. We're talking AI here in San Diego. We're seeing networking, security, observability, brand new AI features. AI on security, security for AI.
Yeah, there's a lot going on now. In a bit of a lighter-hearted moment, I do like being where I can get outside.
Yes.
You know, anyone that's been to enough events in Vegas knows
the fake light doesn't
you get stuck
work for
inside. You? I like to see the sun. San Diego, there is all sun all day long. Having said that, though, you got to miss the restaurants and the gyms in Las Vegas, especially you, because you're kind of like, you know. But no, it's great to.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
But no, it has been great. I mean, this entire event, like I said, the last year has been such a coming out for Cisco, and this event was really kind of like that moment. You know, we saw at the summit, AI Summit, they had the AI Defense launch.
That's right.
Very powerful. But you're starting to see it all put together. You're seeing it at the compute layer. We've talked about the silicon layer. Of course, networking always been a big part, but observability, software. The company's gone to plus 50% of its revenue now being recurring. I mean, it's doing all the things right. And I think this was kind of you and I like to talk about victory laps.
That's right.
There's a bit of a victory lap, and I think there's an opportunity to talk to someone who maybe has the biggest opportunity to do a victory lap.
There is a man who was pretty much, we saw the entire day off and on stages. Jeetu Patel, great to see you.
It's good to see you, and thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Thank you for being here.
You want to do that victory lap just straight away?
You know, as a product person, you're always slightly dissatisfied, and you want to move on to the next thing fast, man.
Yeah, we should talk about that, you know, just like endless, persistent, pervasive dissatisfaction.
You got to keep going.
But you're rolling. I mean, really,
we're having fun.
To your credit. As analysts, our job is to be critical.
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes we will give credit where credit's due. I know over the last year, we challenged you. We challenged your team. You know, we said it's time to we need a new Cisco to rise. So coming straight out of the event here, I mean, you've obviously, you know, you delivered the big keynote. You know, you hit on security. You hit on compute. You had a big moment in networking. Pat and I couldn't help ourselves with what you're doing with some of the programmable silicon for networking. You know, give us the quick rundown of just the biggest sort of moments for you, the biggest announcements that you're most excited about leading the company's product.
I think if you think of our entire stack, from silicon to the network infrastructure, to the compute, to the security platform, to the data, to models, to applications, with observability and security and safety, we literally play in every single one of those areas, right? And so there's very few companies that actually have that level of breadth. Historically, though, that breadth has been a liability for us, not an asset, because we had not tied our pieces together well. And that's what we did over the course of the past year, is we've really made sure that these things operate like a unified platform. And so when you have a platform, your marginal cost of ingestion goes down of every new piece of tech. Every new piece of tech you buy is not just good for the piece of tech that you buy, but also for the piece of tech that you already have. And then there's a compounding effect, you know. And so that was pretty cool. The other thing that's a hidden gem for us, frankly, is our silicon. You know, like if you think about our network ASICs that we build, they are P4 programmable, run to completion. And what that means is that you can actually program those chips for different use cases rather than having to do a special tape out every single time. And in silicon, you know, every single time you do a tape out, like that's a long time. You have to go back to TSMC, and they actually go out and, you know, get the chip manufactured and send it back to you, and then you have to see if it works. And, you know, like there's a long process. But if you have a chip, but through programmability, you can, through software, change the behavior of the chip to be optimized for things like load balancing, things like security being etched into the chip. Those kind of things can have a meaningful upside potential. And I think we've got that. That's one of our kind of hidden gems in our business. Frankly, we wouldn't have a hyperscaler business if we didn't have our own silicon.
Yeah, in 2019, when we were at the original Silicon One event, it was pretty clear on that Cisco wanted to play in all of infrastructure regardless of where it is, right? A lot of the hyperscalers were doing their own switches with ODMs, but if you had the right architecture and the right chip for them, they would come. It first hit with the CSPs, and now you're moving to the hyperscalers, but it seems to work. And then the benefit that I feel like doing your own chips gives to your enterprises are around upgradability. There were certain features that typically would require a different chip that you had to upgrade the software, the SRAM on the chip to do that, and there's a lot of value in that. I mean, you could have sold more switches, but instead you made them upgradable. One question I have though is when it comes to trade-offs, you can build new things like new chips, but you can also invest that money into things like Canvas, which is pulling it from left and right. How do you make those investment decisions? What's your guiding light on what gets the engineering dollar?
You know, the thing that we look at often is what is the megatrend in the industry that is bound to happen, and use a rule to never fight it. Always use it as a tailwind.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of times companies don't get this right, because what they'll do is they can't tell the difference between a megatrend and a hype cycle, and sometimes it's hard, you know, but you have to be able to have enough conviction and judgment that this is
metaverse, hype cycle, AI, megatrend.
Yeah,
kind of.
Or
like,
you know, it's or at least in the metaverse case, it might have been a little too early.
That's right.
And timing-wise, it might have not been quite right. But you know, like Web 2.0 was much more of a hype cycle. You know, and so anyway, so that's the first thing that you do is identify the megatrend. The second thing we have to do for balancing resources is, I think you have to get very good at understanding the problems the customers have rather than taking feature requests from customers.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing that also sometimes gets cross-wired, where you ask the field team, and the field team will say, hey, you know, our customers want you to build this feature. I'm like, no, that's my job. My job is to decide what features we're going to build. The customer's job is to tell us the problems they're facing, because I might think of a more creative way to solve that problem than the way that they're telling me to solve it. And so that's a pretty important dimension. And then the third one is, I think having small, highly efficient teams where you just push the teams to say, go harder and go faster. Great software, specifically in software, great software doesn't get built by large teams. It gets built by a team of 6 to 8 people. You know, now, when you have to scale it, of course you have to get it larger, but you don't build great software with 150 people. And so whenever someone comes to me and says, Jeetu, I need 150 people for this thing, it's a no-op, it's a bad question to begin with, because even if I gave you 150 people, what would happen? You would have to now go out and open up recs for 150 people. You'd have to have job descriptions written. You'd have to go hire 150 people. That's going to take you 9 months. Then you have to ramp them up, and it's going to take you another 6 months. Like, we've lost the window.
Right.
Agents.
Yeah. So you got to compress the time within which you do it. And I think the last thing is what Daniel just said, which is, I think this wave of agentic AI is going to be so profound, and it's going to change so many things. But one of the things that I'm most excited for it to change is it is going to provide a sidekick for every engineer, a partner for every engineer, where we will be able to kind of 10x the capacity of every engineer by having autonomous agents. And we are the first design partner with OpenAI on Codex, which is their automated software engineer. And you know, unlike an IDE that can actually write you some snippets of code for an individual developer, an agent or a group of agents, you can tell it to say, go solve this really hard problem for me, and it'll go out and start solving the problem. Imagine a problem like, make the next generation chip for me.
Right.
I think in the next couple of years, we'll be able to have a chip that's going to be made with a software agent rather than a human agent, and then you can have a very different kind of clock speed and a cycle time for these things.
And we've done some evaluations and some think tank conversations about the fact that if chip design in the future may be completely different, and AI will completely.
By the way, not just chip design, software design, hardware design, everything.
No, but just chips is really interesting because it's been so profoundly iterative with density and like the way we've kind of focused on transistors. that the idea of kind of starting with a blank slate and doing it the way AI might do it could be so different.
Very, very different.
Now I want to ask you, because you kind of started alluding to agents, and I want to kind of zoom out into this kind of macro. So everything about AI is new. So Cisco is a company that really had its sort of identity built on kind of the CPU era, networking for the compute era. Applications were mostly databases with files and blocks and storage, and everything was sort of well understood. Infrastructure converged, and now you got AI. You're partnered with Jensen and NVIDIA. You got AI factories. You got GPUs, not CPUs. Now, I know you can run some things on CPUs, but the efficiency is
No, but largely it's going to be GPU run, yeah.
Data, mostly unstructured now. It's like there is structured data, but most of it's going to be unstructured. So the entire rails of doing everything is different. You got an era where software will be developed largely by machines with, like you said, the help of an engineer, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And then in the end, you've got abstractions where all the software we've ever used could come down to nothing more than a prompt. And it may not even be on a device like the ones in front of us. It may be on some sort of pervasive wearable that you have on your face or a pin on our necks. I'm just kind of curious, how do you think about being in charge of making sure that Cisco stays relevant? Because there's a lot of what you launched this week gives me that kind of warm and fuzzy, but I'm still looking at an app. I'm still using the same productivity tools. I'm still on the same phone. In 5 years, maybe I'm a futurist at heart. Maybe I'm completely nuts. But I actually think this, like you said, profoundly different. I think in 5 years, everything is going to be massively different. And maybe I'm too fast.
I think 24 months you'll have a massive kind of step function change, not even 5 years.
Yeah, I don't even know about analysts. No, but in serious, how are you thinking about that problem? Because everything is still sort of linear. Even though it's going really fast, people sort of see it linear. At some point, it feels like it's going to go exponential.
It is already going exponential in a lot of areas. Here is a really good example. If you look back at November 30th of 2020, of 2022, when ChatGPT came out. And you said at that point in time, let's fast forward 2.5 years. What would make it look like complete magic at that point? Where we are today would look like complete magic. But right now, we've all normalized to it.
So quickly,
right? And in fact, it's the example I gave, the first time you sit in a Waymo, you're like, oh my goodness, this is like magic. The car's driving itself. How bonkers is this? The second time you start doing text messages, third time you're complaining about your seat, it's become completely normal. And I think humans have this amazing capacity to normalize on whatever the new norm is. And so the clock speed of these things is moving at a much faster pace than we realize because we're normalizing pretty fast. And so how do we stay relevant is I think you have to figure out what are the big architectural shifts that are occurring. And based on those architectural shifts, what specifically are you going to do as a company to stay relevant in that architecture shift and stay extremely paranoid? One of the things that this is Andy Grove's kind of, only the paranoid survive. But I feel like it's a super important characteristic of a company. Every company is always only 18 months from being irrelevant. No matter how good your business is, in 18 months you can get to irrelevance. The beauty about tech, though, is if your business wasn't doing well, in 18 months you can actually get it to be doing amazingly well as well. So the reversible nature of the business is also pretty fascinating. And you've just experienced that with Cisco. We are a different company now than we were 18 months ago. And in another 18 months, we'll be unrecognizable for the better. And it happens because you change the culture, you change the tempo, you change the clock speed of the company. There's a spring in the step in people, and they're now excited to innovate. And once you start innovating a little bit and people start responding to it, then you get a little bit more juice in the system and you feel like doing it again. And so that thing kind of snowballs and compounds on itself. And right now, if you look at the entire team, we've got 27,000 engineers. I mean, I'll tell you this, I've never seen a collective group of people so excited about doing the next thing.
So the rate of change is immense. To be fair, the change are areas where there's less friction. If you have access to the internet and a web browser, I can do ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of the,
yes.
And if I have a smartphone. And the other part is code completion. right? If I have an access to GitHub, GitHub Copilot, and many others, I'm doing some good work. But if I look at what is the recommendation you give to a Fortune 500 company that is 40 years old, has a combination of mainframe, there are still minis, legacy compute, this patchwork quilt of applications. How do they move quickly with the reality that they need to change a lot internally?
I think none of this typically tends to be rocket science. It tends to be around, have you set the right priorities and incentives for your teams?
Yeah.
And are your teams obsessed about making sure that they're focused on the right metrics? And so in my mind, the metrics are very simple. Build great products that people talk to their friends and family about, because there's no product that has gotten to hundreds of millions of people with any other marketing mechanism other than word of mouth. Word of mouth is the most important kind of amplifier that you have out there. So build great products people love. Get them highly adopted and understand why people come back. And number 3, get to commercial relevance. And every product leader, every engineering leader has to get incentivized on those success metrics, because if you do that right, then all the other things start to kind of fizzle away. What you have to also remember is don't reward certain behaviors. Don't reward behaviors of territory hogging. Like corporate America is hardwired in saying, the only way that I get further up in the food chain is by actually owning more. No, sometimes you need to own less. But that's not the employee's fault. That's because you don't give them a promotion unless they own more.
Right.
And I actually personally feel like one of the big things that we changed in the product org is everyone wanted to be a GM in Cisco. I'm like, there's no GMs. Like, we only care about people that are product people. We only care about people that are engineers, only care about people that are designers, only care about people that are AI researchers. And so once you take away that and say, okay, the rule book is different. How you make more money, how you get to a bigger title is not based on how much scope you have, because that just goes out and creates a political game of accumulating territory. Instead, it's about how much growth you can generate. The moment you make it about growth, people want to shed things that aren't growing well. Like, I don't want to touch this. I want to actually grow this thing. It's much easier to grow it. Great. Now grow that thing, and if you can grow it fast, you'll have a great future ahead. And if you can't grow it fast, you're not as good as you think you are. So work harder, and we'll continue to keep supporting you. And so that's the piece that I feel we have to, in order to make sure that the culture shift happens, you have to get the incentives right, you have to get the right kind of people, and you have to make sure that you've got the right true north.
Yeah, you got to break down the bureaucracy and cut out all the fiefdoms that cause slow enterprise
But
growth.
don't put up with the bureaucracy. Like, there are times when people, like, we used to do these things when I first joined Cisco. It was actually really interesting because I said, let's do design reviews. And like, I'm not really sure if executive vice president wants to do a design review. Like, Jeetu, we don't think this is worth your time. Like, no, I want to do design reviews. I want to know where a pixel goes on every single screen in WebEx because I want to know what's happening. Like, what is the experience? And so what would happen is each one of the teams would talk to their boss and their boss and their boss and their boss. And by the time like 7 weeks would go by before I'd have a design review, I'm like, how about this? How about we all just roll up our sleeves and edit, leave our titles out of the room, and just show me from the person who's building the product what their thinking was when they were doing this. And so we started doing these design reviews, and it took a couple of times, and then the managers got secure enough, and they're like, you know what? We'll see it the first time, and Jeetu sees it, it's okay. And we started doing these, and it completely changed the entire culture of the team. Because now the people started thinking about, what do I need to do to make this product better, rather than what do I need to do to make it okay for my manager to see.
Yeah.
And people stopped worrying about what the manager said. People just started worrying about, how do I make the product better? That's the singular objective. And if you obsess on that, everything else follows, because commercial success follows, adoption follows, all of those things follow.
Yeah, what a great story. What a great way to wrap this up. I want to thank you so much, Jeetu, for being part of our conversations here at Cisco Live. It's always good to sit down with you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining us here on the 6.5 on the road here in San Diego at Cisco Live 2025. Stay with all our coverage. Check out all of our other content here and, of course, across the 6-5. But for this episode, for this show, it's time to say goodbye. We'll see you all